I'm assuming everybody can hear me okay. If you cannot hear me or you have any issues on that end, please ask in the chat. My name is Sridhar. I am with Apsona, and I'm the one that wrote the multi-step reporting package here that we'll talk about. So my hope is to give you a sense of what multi-step reporting is all about in some sort of a tutorial manner, give you an overview of what kinds of problems it solves in the context of a specific report and so on. So let's look at what we have on the agenda here. So we'll talk about what we want to do, what the problem is we're trying to address, trying to narrow down the scope of what we want to talk about. We'll do a little bit of background, maybe 10-15 minutes. We'll look through the multi-step reporting UI, talk about some of the aspects of Apsona's reporting facility that differs in some ways from the ways you might be used to in Salesforce. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk a little about data models and how objects relate to one another and why that's meaningful when building reports. Now, the bulk of the process, the bulk of the webinar will be around one specific report that I thought would be useful in illustrating some of the features that you might find, some of the problems you will run into in typical practical situations. So we'll look at that one report, go through the process of how to build it, and along the way we'll illustrate lots of the little related issues that come up with multi-step reporting. And I'm hoping that will run about 20-25 minutes. So I'm hitting for about 40-45 minutes of presentation and about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end of this presentation. But feel free to post your questions in the chat, and I will try and answer them as best I can along the way. So let's look first of all at a generic, at a Salesforce installation here for the context in which we will run the reporting process. So what you're looking at here is a very generic Salesforce org that has the nonprofit starter pack installed in it. So the nonprofit starter pack, for those of us who are not in the nonprofit domain, it's a bunch of add-ons, a bunch of extra objects and logic that's built on top of Salesforce, and it has objects that help nonprofits manage their business processes. And so we'll talk about some of the custom objects and fields that the nonprofit starter pack comes with. And the reason why I chose this particular org was that a lot of the people here, of course, are from the nonprofit space, but also given the fact that one very common question is, can this tool handle custom as well as native objects? That's a really common thing that people ask. Given that that's a common question, I want to make sure that I illustrate that custom objects are in fact handled in here and show how that's done. So in here, in this org, like I said, it's all dummy data. It's a generic org, and we use it only for testing our products. So don't pay attention to the data quality. You'll see lots of data mismatches which really don't make sense in real-world scenarios. And the idea here is only to illustrate the process of creating the report, not so much paying attention to what the data looks like. So in here, in this org, I've installed Apsona. So it's available as a tab here. And if I open this thing in a new tab, I guess I don't need this. It comes up with its little UI. I'm not going to talk about the Apsona UI per se here during this webinar. There's a lot of features in here that you might already be familiar with if you've used Apsona, and if not, there's other material on the web on our website that talks about the UI and its facilities. So we'll leave that off for now. I'm going to focus entirely on the multi-step report side of things. So go back here. Let's talk about what the problem is we're trying to solve. What we're trying to do is address the question of what it means, what the process is for building a report. And what does it mean to build a report? What is a report in the first place? A report, in most practical terms, at least for the purposes of what we're dealing with here, a report is simply a collection of fields with the data values that are pulled in for those fields, and those fields may may be pulled in from multiple related objects. There may be filter criteria applied on those fields so that you get only a subset of the data values you want. Fields may be just raw field values or aggregated field values such as total donation or last donation date or what have you. So when you talk about, for example, the total donation or the total opportunity value, you're looking at the sum of the values of a particular field when selected over a particular filter condition. For example, you might say the sum of the amounts of opportunities that occurred in 2013, which basically says select the opportunity records that occurred in 2013 according to whatever occurred in 2013 means to you, maybe close date, maybe created date, whatever. So you set up a filter on that, and then you sum up the amount on those records. So that's an example of a calculated or an aggregate field. Similarly, you might want to know the last donation date, the most recent date, the highest value of the donation field, of the donation date field, or the close date field, if you will, that is associated with a filter set of records. So if you ask the question, what was the most recent or the latest donation that was given in 2013, you're really asking for the highest value of the date on the filtered set of records, on the filtered set of opportunity records associated with the year 2013. So in a report, what we will be doing is pulling together fields from multiple related objects, and we want to show all of them in one view. That is a really common need. You want to see, for example, all of your donors, all of your contacts. You want to see all of the donations they gave you, or perhaps you want to see only the sum totals and highest values they gave you on a year-by-year basis. And then you want to see possibly the most recent one, the donation that they gave most recently, and other associated information. So we'll weave all those pieces together into a report as we go along. So now let's talk a little about the user interface for multi-step reports. When you install the multi-step report add-on into your org, it'll appear as a tab in Apsona. And so let's see if I'm going to try and answer questions if possible. Well, I guess no questions so far. That's fine. So when you install multi-step reports in your Apsona or in your Salesforce org, it'll show up as a tab, as I said, in Apsona on the right end, right next to the settings tab. And it has a UI whereby you can manage reports in this format. You can put reports into folders. I've got a bunch of different folders here. Each of these folders has a bunch of test reports that we play around with. And in each of these reports, when you click on it, it gives you a little menu that says you can edit the report or run it or clone it or delete it. So when you look at an individual report, let's look at this one, for example. If I click edit on it, it gives me a list of steps in the report, and it gives you tabs across each of those steps, telling you properties of that step. So let's talk about the idea of a multi-step report here. Typically, what happens in a report problem, in a report creation problem, is someone gives you a notion, a vaguely defined or a fairly loosely defined idea of what they want to see in a report. They want to say, for example, I want to see all my donors who donated at all, and then I want to see the donations they made in 2012, that they made in 2013, and then what campaigns they came from, what campaigns they donated to, how much did they donate, what payments did they make, that sort of thing. So they want to create a report in which they see all of these in one view. Now, in the report creation process, what you'll have to do is map that fairly loosely defined idea to the objects you've got in your Salesforce org. So you have to be aware when you map the report specification, if you will, to the objects. You have to be aware of what the objects look like. Where do the fields come from? What objects contain the fields that have the data you want to pull in? And then how do the objects relate to one another? So there we talk about lookups across objects. So for example, you might say there is the idea of a contact that contains contact information, first name, last name, email address, what have you. And there is the idea of a donation or an opportunity that contains the date of the opportunity, the close date, if you will, the amount, the stage, and the name of the opportunity, and so on. And then there is the idea of a role, of an opportunity contact role object, which tells us what the relationship is between the opportunity and the contact. So this sort of gets into the idea of the data model. So let's talk about that for a second here. This diagram is drawn to show the relationships between the objects in the nonprofit startup pack. And what I've done here is I've put in little blue boxes to represent individual objects. And the yellow-orange boxes are custom objects. The blue boxes are native objects, native to Salesforce. The yellow-orange objects are specific to the nonprofit startup pack. And then what I've done is I've drawn arrows wherever there is a lookup from one object to the other. So, for example, if you look at this arrow right here, there is an arrow from contact to organization. It's telling us that there is a lookup from contact to organization. And then similarly, in the relationship object, there are two lookups from the relationship to contact. It's basically a way of telling us what contacts are related to what other contacts. And similarly, there are two lookups here from affiliation, excuse me, from affiliation to organization and from affiliation to contact, telling us which organization a particular contact, organizations, if you will, plural, a contact is related to. So each of these objects obviously fulfills a particular role, a particular purpose in the modeling scheme, and so the relationships between the objects are denoted or captured by the lookups from one object to another. Now, the other thing I want to point out about this diagram is that I have deliberately drawn the diagram so that the arrows go bottom to top. If you look at a typical entity relationship diagram people build, there's really not a whole lot of structure to it, in that objects are laid out in fairly arbitrary order. What I want to do, though, here is I want to show fairly explicitly the way objects relate to one another. So when an object has no lookups emanating from it, it shows up at the top of the data model diagram. So let's see if I can edit this a bit here. This object right here shows up at the very top of the data model diagram because it doesn't have any organization, doesn't have any meaningful lookups that come out of it, if you will. There is the idea of a parent organization, which we haven't captured in this diagram. But other than that, there are no significant lookups that come out of this object. So it figures at the top. The next level below is contact and donation. Those are objects that are that have lookups to the objects at the previous level. And then at the next level further below are the objects that have to do with affiliation, relationships, and so on, that have lookups to the objects at the previous level. So you ask the question, what does this buy us? Why does it make sense to draw the diagram in this way? Well, when there is a lookup from one object to another, that basically says that basically tells us or identifies. For example, when there is a lookup from contact to organization, it tells us which organization this contact belongs to. The lookup tells us the identity of the organization to which that contact belongs. But if you look at it the other way, the lookup in the inverse direction tells us for a given organization which contacts are associated with that organization. So that lookup identifies the inverse relationship, those contacts associated with that organization, and that is a one-to-many relationship. So for a particular organization, there are multiple contacts, and so there's a one-to-many relationship between organizations and contacts. And that holds true for all of these relationships. Whenever there is a lookup from object A to object B, that means there is a one-to-many relationship from B to A. And what this diagram gives you is that you have a natural layout that sort of tells you that as you go deeper in the diagram, further down below in the diagram, there are, in a sense, more records. So the relationships go one-to-many, one-to-many, one-to-many as you go deeper down in this diagram. There's another benefit to it, is that when you do data imports, you typically will want to import the data on objects at the top level in this diagram before you proceed to objects at the deeper levels in this diagram. But since we don't talk about imports here, we'll leave that out. By the way, several of our users have told us that this diagram is pretty useful in its own right. So what we've done is we've captured it on our website. So if you go to the help and support section on our website and you see the data model diagram section here, there's a link there that takes you to the diagram here. So this is a little more complex than the one we're showing right now, but that's the general idea. So you can go back and look at this diagram whenever you need to. So that's about data models. What I'm going to do is play around a little with multi-step reports now, to try to illustrate some of the features that it provides, and then we will apply it to building a specific report. So let's go back to the list. We click the back to list link here, and it takes us to the list of multi-step reports. So what I'm going to do is let's delete this and make a brand new report called Basic Ideas. So let's make a new report. So when you click the new button, it gives you this Create Multi-Step Report UI, and we'll call it Basic Ideas. This hopefully shouldn't take too long to show these ideas here, and we'll put it in the webinar September 19th folder, and we'll start adding steps to it. When you click Add Step, it pulls up this UI where you create the computational steps associated with the report. And for this small report, I'm going to only show one step to illustrate the properties of that step. See how things work out when you have just one single step. And then we will generalize from there to extend to multiple steps. So let's say, let's call this a baby step, if you will. And when you specify a step, you have to tell it which object the data records will be retrieved from for this step. So the records retrieved from drop down here is a list of all of the objects available to you. We can pull in from any of the whole bunch of objects, obviously. So let's say we pull in from the opportunity object. We select the opportunity object. Now, if you look at the other tabs across the top, you're basically telling it what fields are to be retrieved from this object in the Retrieved Fields tab. In the Filter Terms tab, you will tell it how to apply filters on, or rather, what filtered set of records to retrieve from this object. In the Range and Sort tab, there's a couple of other options which we will not get into at the moment, and we'll talk about it later. And then the Linkages tab gets to how to set up relationships between the steps in this report. So let's go back and look at Retrieved Fields here. I'm going to start with a really simple one-step report that has only one field, and that happens to be the stage field. Okay, if I save and run this, it gives me only 7 records, and that seems to be a little bit counterintuitive. You see, it's telling me that there's 7 records here, and that's counterintuitive in the sense that typically the opportunities object obviously has a whole lot more reports. I'm sorry, a whole lot more records, and we only get 7 records. And that's because what Apsona does is an automatic deduplication of whatever records that are pulled in. So it collapses all duplicates that it finds in the records and pulls in only the non-duplicates along the columns that you specified here along the fields you've specified here. So in this case, there are only 7 stages among the objects, among the records that are available to us. So it shows only those 7. Now, if I edit this report, go back to the Retrieved Fields tab, and add, let us say, record type. And if I do a save and run now I get 23 records. And that's because what's happening is it's deduplicating along 2 different columns now. And it's saying, well, for the closed lost stage, for these 4 record types, I have these records available. And so on for the rest of the stages here. So the automatic deduplication is a key feature that has a certain set of benefits you'll see in a minute here. If I go here to edit, and in the retrieved fields now, I say, instead of pulling in a field, let's say I open up the metrics panel and get the number of records field here, and then I do a save and run. And you see what happens now is that it's telling me for each of these pairs of values, for closed lost being the stage and for profit being the opportunity record type, the number of records is 7. So this gives you some information about the way the records are broken out across the different stages and record types. So this in and of itself is useful in many situations, the ability to provide metrics across the board. Can you dedupe off of specific columns? Well, if you add a column, then it automatically dedupes off of that column. Now, one of the things that this actually comes back to bite us in some cases, where this deduplication capability, because people build reports that include only, let's say, the name and the phone number of a contact. And if it turns out that there are multiple contacts with the same name and phone number, then it will automatically collapse all of them. And that is misleading in some situations. So people do want, in some situations, to have a complete, non-duplicated report. And to do that, the easiest way is to go into Edit and in the retrieved fields, just pull in the record ID of the record, of the object. Now the record ID, by the way, the record ID field here, is indicated with a key icon. So when you click that field, you're basically, oh, I can't do, well, it's telling me that the record ID is chosen in this case, because in this case, I'm pulling the count of records. And it never makes sense to pull in the record ID field and the count in one report, because you will always get 1 as the record ID, as the count value. So it doesn't even let you pull in the record ID and the count in one report. So we can simply remove this, and let's get the record ID this time. And when I do a save and run this time, it tells me there are 587. So that's the right number. That's the number of opportunities we have in the database. So that gives you a sort of an idea for what deduplication and metrics are about to some level. Now what I'm going to do is actually launch into building a sample report. We're pretty much out of time on phase 1 here. Any other questions? Let me do it real quick. What happened? Okay. So let's move on then. So the next thing I want to do is talk about how to build a full multi-step report. But I want to do that in the context of a specific report to illustrate the ideas that come along the way. So let's go back here and look at this report. So when you're asked to build a report, what will you do? You're typically given a specification of what you want to build, as I said, in a somewhat loose fashion. And it is up to you as report designer to come up with a mock-up. And in the mock-up, you will say what fields you want in the report. Where do those fields come from? As in what object, what field name? Where do they come from? Are they simple direct value fields, or are they calculated fields such as total or highest or what have you? And how do they get laid out? So you need to know the relationships between the objects from which you pull in the data. So to show those ideas, what I've done is I've created a mock-up here. And in this mock-up, I basically provided the idea is to create a report in which I want to get all of my donors that have donated at all in my database. So I want their contact info. Basically, I want their name and email right here. Come on, don't do that to me. I want their name and email. For each one of them, I want the total donation that they made and the highest donation that they made in 2012. Similarly, total and highest donation they made in 2013. Then the highest donation they made, the identity of the highest donation they made. In other words, the record itself. I'm not interested in aggregate values. I want to know which donation it was that was the highest one by date and by amount, and I want the date of that donation. And finally, I want the payments associated with that highest donation. So I want this report, which is sort of blown out in one horizontal view, showing me a bunch of different bits of information about the donor and their donations. Now, this report embeds a couple of common use cases that people ask us about. They say, I want a year-on-year report in which I want all my donors, and I want to see how much they donated every year. So in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2011, whatever. So I want to see a year-on-year donation. That's a pretty common ask. Another one is the highest donation, of course, is a pretty common ask as well. A third kind of requirement is that they want to see this built-out report in which you have a excuse me. In which you have a single horizontal view that shows data from a lot of different related objects. And if you look at this report, what we're doing is pulling in data from actually 4 different related objects. There's contacts, there's opportunity contact role, there's donation, and payment. So we're pulling in data records from all of those objects. And that's where it makes sense to talk about the sub-model, the data model that we're interested in specifically for building this report. So the idea here is to identify what objects the fields of that report come from and how those objects are related. What specifically are the lookup fields of those across those objects that we will use in this report. Now, in this example, this is fairly simple in that a particular pair of objects in this diagram has at the most one lookup between them. In other words, for example, there's only one lookup from contact role to contact and only one from contact role to donation. Just contrast that, for example, with this data model. If you involve the relationship object, there are 2 lookups from the relationship to the contact. And in fact, in practice, you'll see lots of situations where objects have lots of lookups to parent objects and to other objects. So when you create a report, you not only need to identify what objects you want to use in the report, you also need to know which specific lookups you will use when spanning the relationship from one to the other. Because, for instance, if you were to build a report that has contacts and relationships, you want to know who the base contact is and who the related contact is. And in those 2 cases, you want to use one lookup in one case and the other lookup in the second case. So it's important to identify what lookups you're using here. So in this case, we're looking at fields from the contact object because we are going to get the contact name and email address. We're looking at the donation object because we're interested in the total donation and the highest donation value. But we also need to be interested in the contact role object because that is the object that relates contacts and donations. Even though in this case we might not even be pulling in any fields from the role object, we will still need to involve it because that is what enables us to bridge the gap between contact and donation. And then similarly, we're going to be using the payment object because we're getting fields from that object to link to the donation. We're going to ask, what are the payments associated with that donation? And that's why I drew this smaller diagram that tells us what object we're looking at. Now also, the lookups are telling us aggregate values, as I said. So the fact that there is a one-to-many relationship, as you can tell, from contact to contact role, and therefore from contact to donation, enables us to talk about the many donations that a particular contact can have, and therefore aggregate over all of them. We can talk about getting the total donation value for a contact filtered by donation date, for example. So let's begin building out this report. So let's go back to the list here, and let's make a new report, and let's call it webinar demo, and let's put it in the webinar September 19th folder. And so we'll start adding steps to this report. So click Add Step, and as I said, we get the bunch of tabs across the top, enabling us to specify the properties of that step. So going back to the mockup here, the first step is to pull in contact info. And in a way, I'm kind of guilty of making this mockup suit the multi-step report feature, in the sense that I've broken it out into blocks which say contact info, donations, highest donation payments, and those 5 blocks sort of naturally fall into 5 steps in the multi-step report. And in that sense, I've sort of tailored the markup to the multi-step report. But you can also argue the opposite, that the design of the multi-step report feature was motivated by the common use cases where people do have these kinds of blocks. Where if you look at, for example, the idea of join reports in Salesforce, that's basically what they do, is they join multiple reports across a horizontal dimension. And that's really what we're doing here as well. Or if you look at it yet another way, a very common situation, where a very common approach that people take to building a report is they say, when they have a complicated report that cannot be serviced by a simple Salesforce report, what they often do is build multiple reports and pull in the record IDs for those reports, and then build VLOOKUPs across them in Excel. Very tedious process, but it gets the job done. And in that sense, the multi-step report capability is exactly the same as VLOOKUPs across IDs, because it gives you an automatic way of looking up or linking across relationships. So anyway, here are the 5 blocks that we want to build, and they'll probably end up building 1 step for each of these blocks. So my first step is to get contact info. So I'll say contact info like that, and then I'm going to get this thing from the contact object. So I will select the contact object in this list. No, I didn't select it. Okay, that's better. And now I move on to the Received Fields tab. And here I'm going to select what fields I want for this contact. So let's say I want their full name and email address. Full name, and I click email to get their email address. Now, if I simply click save and run at this point, I will get all of the contacts in my system. So if I do a save and run, I get 1,578 records, all of them. And remember the specification. We said earlier that we only want the people that donated. We don't want everybody. So let's go back and edit this report. And when we do so, what do we want to? What does it mean to say we only want donors? Well, the way we ascribe significance to it is we say that only the contacts that have an associated contact role record are eligible. So if you go into the filter terms here and you add a term, you can select a field that specifies that they have a record ID in the contact role object. So what we do is we scroll down to the opportunity contact role panel here, open up that object, and say there is a record in the opportunity contact role object for this contact. So we select the contact role ID and say it exists. That is enough to guarantee that there is a role record associated with this contact. If we now do a save and run here, we only get 239 in contrast with the 1500 we had earlier. And that's because there are only that many contacts that have associated donation records or associated role records, right? So that fulfills, sort of, kind of, in a way, the first step here. We obtain their contact info and name and email. Now, the next step is to move on to this block where we want their donations in 2012, actually want their total and highest amounts. So the way we do that is we edit this report and we ask, how can we relate the contact to the opportunity, because the opportunity is where the total and highest donation values come from. So to that end, if you go back and again look at the data model, wrong one here. Look at the data model. We have to go through the contact role object, as I said, to get to the donation object. So we can now pull in fields from the contact role, because that is the linkage that gets us from contact to donation. Notice that we will not be using donation directly here. We're using the contact role object when we pull in data for this step. So the reason you will see in just a minute, I select the opportunity contact role object, and when I look at the retrieved fields here and look at the field chooser, the panels, you noticed earlier already, give us the capability to pull in fields from not only this object, which is the contact role, but also any objects to which there is a lookup from this object. Now, contact role has two lookups. Well, there's the contact lookup here, there is the opportunity lookup here, and those are of course indicated by the link icons. There are also the created by and last modified by lookups, but we're not interested in those at this point. We're interested in the contact and opportunity panels. We open up the opportunity panel, and we say that what we are interested in here is the total opportunity amount and the highest opportunity amount. How do we get those? We open up the metrics panel, and we say we click on the amount, and we want the sum of the amount. That's the total opportunity amount. Similarly, we want the highest, so we select that as well. Now that also tells you, by the way, that you can apply multiple metrics, multiple calculations to the same data field. Additionally, we want filter terms, which say that the donation was the one that applied in 2012. If you go back and look at the markup here, what did it say? We wanted the donations in 2012. So we add a term wherein we want to say that the close date of the opportunity, open up the opportunity panel below, look at the close date, and we say that the year only field of that close date equals 2012. Now, if I simply do a save and run at this point, watch what happens. Not quite what I wanted. I didn't even save it. Something went wrong here. Let me go do this again. Oh, go away. So 2012 donations. I think I chose the wrong folder, is why I messed up. Anyway, so let's go back to opportunity, contact role, go to retrieve fields, pull in the opportunity, the metrics, amount, sum, and then metrics amount highest. And then in the filter terms, I want to add a term. And in the opportunity close date, we want to say that it's year only equals 2012. If I save and run, we got two blocks, two unrelated blocks, not quite what we wanted. We want to be able to line up the contacts and the opportunities in such a way that the contact names line up with the total values. So let's edit this. It looks like I blew something really badly here. Well, bear with me. I blew something badly. I clicked the wrong button somewhere along the way, so I really want the contact object here. And I want their name and email. And I want their contact role to be available. I save and run. That takes care of the first step. Now I edit it, add a step, 2012 donations. And this comes from the opportunity contact role. I want the opportunity metrics, amount, sum, and amount highest. And I want a filter that adds a term that says the close date, year only, equals 2012. And if I save and run, I get two blocks, which is not what I want. I want them to line up correctly. So the way I line them up is that's where I was earlier when I got sidetracked here because of that error on my part. What I really need to do is link the donations here with the contacts here. The way you do that, obviously, is using the contact ID, because that's what tells us, given a particular contact role, which contact it is that we're talking about. To link those two is where the linkages thing comes in here. The linkages feature comes in. So we need to pull in on the two steps, on the two sides of the linkage, the linking field. So we want the contact ID on this side. We save that. And on the donation side, we also want the contact ID in the retrieved fields. So here we get that field, the contact field. And now if we go over to the linkages step, it offers us the ability to link up the record ID of the contact with the contact ID in the opportunity contact role. We select that linkage. Now this linkage step is a really common stumbling block where people, when you build a large report, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of linkages there. So you need to select just the right one to link across. And that's why it's important to understand what the data model is that you're working with. And that's why I drew up that data model earlier. And you see a bit more of that in just a second here. When you save and run this, we now have the 2012 donations, as you can see. So this person gave 55,000 as the highest amount, and well, 20,000 as the highest, and the total here. Excuse me, and so on. You have again 242 records with totals and highests. Now, and these two are actually two different records because they have two different email addresses, which is why we went up to 242. Let's build out this report to get the additional steps. We did the 2012 donations here. We have to get the 2013 donations. And at this point, we can take advantage of a shortcut that it provides us. When we go to 2012 donations, we can simply clone that step. If you look at 2012 donations, we have a bunch of fields and filter terms and so on that we've all set up. And we don't want to have to redo all of that. So simply clone it. And when you click the clone button, it gives you an additional step here. And we rename it to 2013 donations. Right? And obviously, we want to also change the filter term so that we want the donation year to be 2013 and not 2012. The linkages will be set up just as is. You notice that there's additional linkages that it offers you, but you don't need it at this point, because you're really saying You only want the 2013 donations associated with these contacts. There's no other additional linkages you need. So save and run that, and we get 2013 donations. So we've got a sort of a year-on-year layout at this point. To do the other two steps here, we want the highest donation in 2014 and the payments in 2014. So how do we get the highest donation? Let's edit it and add a step. And highest, we say highest 2014 donation. And this also comes from the opportunity contact role object. Again, because that's the linkage between the contact and the opportunity. Again, we want the retrieved fields, but this time we're asking specifically for the record with the highest value. We're not asking for a calculated value. Therefore, we will not open the metrics panel. Instead, we will just get the raw data values from the opportunity object, the amount and the close date. And I think that's what we said in the markup, that we'll retrieve the amount and the close date. And we also want to filter it so that, again, the opportunity close date lies within 2013. So the close date, let's say as a variation, I want the close date to be on or after 1/1/2014, right? And I want, again, the linkage. Well, let's see if did I get the record ID? I did not get the record ID. I need to get the record ID of the contact in order to set up the linkage. So let me get the contact ID here. And when we go over to range and sort, this is where we say we want the record of a certain sort criterion being retrieved. Here we're getting the record containing the highest value of the opportunity close date is what we want, which is the most recent donation associated with that contact. And then in the linkages step, we add a linkage that says we want the opportunity contact role contact matches contact info contact ID. This is where it gets a little bit confusing because it gives you a bunch of different options for lookups available to it. So look carefully and see what we really want is, since we're getting the records from the contact role object and we're lining up the contact object in step 1, that's the one we want to select. We select that, and then we save and run. And we see that we have the highest donations available as well, as you can see. And I will finish off the report with one more step, and that is the payments for donation, highest donation. And this comes from the payment object. So we select the payment object here. And what do we want from the payment object? We go back and look at the markup. We want the amount and the date from the payment object. So we get the, let's see, the payment amount and created date. And we also want the opportunity ID because we want to link to the opportunity, this one here. And let's save it and make sure we got the opportunity ID in this step right here. I don't think we did. And if we didn't, we obviously cannot link. If we look at this step and go look at the linkages, it'll tell us that there's no linkage possible because there's no record IDs available on the two sides. We only got the opportunity ID in the payment step here. We did not get the opportunity ID in the highest donation step. So let's get that. So go over here and click opportunity and save it. And go back and look at this step, step 5, and look at the linkages. And this time we have the ability to link those two together, save and run. So that last piece gives us the payment, the payments for the highest donation. You can see that it now breaks it out so that this first record, for example, Adam Dunn, has 2 payments associated with their payment record, with their highest donation record for 2014, and that's why you get 2 of them here with blanks across the left side of that record. Similarly, this one has 5 payments here, and so on. So let's see. Anything else I want to touch upon here? Well, I want to try and give you a really quick run through of one example report. People who did not donate. This is another common case of a use case that people want. They want to know what donors they reached out to, what prospects they reached out to that did not donate. And that is also possible to do because of the way there's this thing called negation that you can use. If you look at the steps in this report, essentially what we're building out is a report in which we want all the campaigns that subject to some criteria, what donations came from those campaigns, what donors gave those donations, and what contacts were parts of those campaigns but did not donate to those campaigns. And that's what this report is doing. So in the first step, it pulls in the campaigns. In the next step, it pulls in the donations from those campaigns, from the opportunity object, because there's a lookup from opportunity to campaign. We can take advantage of that here. As you can see in the linkages, the campaign of the opportunity matches the campaign ID. The donors in that campaign come from the contact role object, and again linked to this donation list. And the non-donors is where the interesting piece is, where you can say the contact ID does not match the donor's contact. So there's a negation happening here. So when you run this thing, you'll get those people that, well, we've hidden all the other steps, so we got only the list of contacts that were in those campaigns but did not donate. So we're almost, well, we ran a little over than by my budget, so let me start answering questions here. Can I share these reports? Well, you can certainly share them when if someone has a multi-step report license, they'll have the ability to look at the record, the multi-step reports for everybody else, and so you can run. If you have if you're looking at reports from someone else, you can run them and clone them. You can't edit them. Will this recording be posted? Yes. Excuse me. Yes, we're recording this webinar, so it will be posted. Can I add a calculated field? The calculated field feature is really close to delivery. We're actively working on that. We'll finish that up, and when it's available, we'll share it with everybody. What about people without licenses? Is there some kind of reader? No, not at the moment. Basically, you have to have the full Apsona multi-step report license to be able to run or use multi-step reports. What is the cost of multi-step reports for nonprofits? Well, if you look at our website here, there's a pricing page that talks about prices here for nonprofits. The multi-step reporting costs $96 per user per year. Let's see. What other questions? You can certainly export the report. It may be worth pointing that out here. If you go back and look at this this report that we built a moment ago. This one. If we run it, there's the list of records we got. Now we can export this in one of 2 formats. You can export in CSV format, and let's save it and open it. And just so you get a sense of what the contrast is between the two, this is a standard CSV export, no frills. There is also an Excel export here. When you click Export XLS and save it and run it and open it, this is a little bit more fancy in that you get an Excel layout with the sort columns and so on, and totals available at the bottom. like here, as you would expect. There is, in fact, also a merge tool which we offer that lets you merge multi-step reports into your own custom Excel templates, and that's a lot more powerful than this, but that is the subject of another webinar. Well, someone asked that question, can I import a summary report into Excel? Yes, that is done using the Excel merge tool, which we'll talk about separately. Can I save a report into an SFDC folder? No, that's not possible. At some point, probably. Are you planning to add dashboards? Most certainly. In fact, there is an upcoming feature that will be available soon that lets you build a Visualforce page which contains an embedding of the multi-step report you choose. So what you can then do is take that Visualforce page and either put it in a dashboard or even put it as a related list in a detail page in Salesforce. And when you do that, you have one multi-step report, for example, which contains your donors' donation information year on year, as well as their most recent payment, most recent donation and their payment, all in one view. So that is also possible. That's coming up. People asking about the data model tool. I'm not sure I can recommend a diagramming tool at this point for this purpose. Can you provide column aliases? I'm not sure I understand the question about column aliases, so please reach out to me after the fact. I do want to say I may not have answered all of your questions here by any means, and I would be delighted to get feedback from you to answer any questions you may have. So please feel free to reach out to us. Just send me an email, sridhar@apsona.com, or you can send an email to support@apsona.com. In fact, the easiest way to reach us is, if you've not noticed, there is this thing called the feedback link up at the top right in your Apsona. When you click that, it puts up a box in which it asks you what you want to contact us about. Just fill it in and click send, and it'll come to us right away, and we will try and respond to it as soon as possible. So any other questions? Doesn't look like it. So I want to say thank you once again for your interest in this webinar. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone. Please visit our website for whatever information you need. Please contact us. We'll be very happy to help you get started, get set up, and get going. We're really gratified by the interest that people are showing in this tool. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.